They say betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, but until you feel it carve through your soul, you can never truly understand the weight of those words. I had always thought that if something like this ever happened to me, I'd see the signs, some shift in behavior, a change in routine, a hesitation in her voice. But I was blind, too trusting, too certain that love meant security. I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed. It was a Thursday evening, nothing out of the ordinary. I had finished work early and decided to surprise Emily with dinner. She had been distant lately, claiming stress from work, so I figured a quiet evening together might help. I picked up her favorite pasta from the Italian place down the street, grabbed a bottle of wine, and headed home with a light heart. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Mark's car parked outside. My best friend, the man who had stood beside me at my wedding. My brother in every way except blood. It wasn't unusual for him to drop by. We'd been close for years. Maybe he was here to borrow something. Maybe they were talking about some surprise for me. I wish I had turned around. I wish I had left before I saw what I saw. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, balancing the food in my hands, a small smile tugging at my lips as I imagined Emily's reaction. That smile died the moment I heard her laugh. Soft, breathless, intimate. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. I followed the sound upstairs, my heartbeat hammering in my chest. Maybe I already knew. Maybe some part of me had pieced it together in those few seconds, but denial is a powerful thing. I reached our bedroom door, slightly ajar, and pushed it open. And there they were. Emily, Mark, tangled together in our bed, oblivious to my presence. For a moment, my brain refused to process it. It felt like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. But when Emily turned her head, her eyes widening in shock before quickly shifting to something eerily close to boredom, reality slammed into me with the force of a hurricane. She didn't scream. She didn't scramble to cover herself. She just stared at me like I was an unwelcome guest in my own home. Mark sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and let out a slow, measured sigh, as if I had interrupted something mildly inconvenient. I dropped the food. The neatly packaged dinner hit the floor, the wine bottle slipping from my grasp and shattering against the hardwood. The sound seemed to echo through the room, mixing with the pounding in my head. What the hell is this? My voice came out strangled, barely recognizable. Emily sighed, brushing her hair back like we were having a casual conversation over coffee. Nathan, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? My blood ran cold. I turned to Mark, expecting guilt, remorse, something human. Instead, he had the audacity to smirk. "Look, man," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "It just happened. It just happened. Like a spilled drink, an accidental text, something trivial and forgettable." I took a step forward, fist clenched. I wanted to hit him, to knock that smug expression off his face, to make him feel even an ounce of the pain ripping through me. But Emily moved between us, not out of fear, but out of sheer irritation, like I was the one inconveniencing her. "I think you should go," she said, her tone flat. "Go." My chest burned with disbelief. This is my house. My marriage. Emily crossed her arms. It was. But let's be honest, Nathan. It hasn't been working for a long time. You just didn't want to see it. I stared at her, searching for some sign that the woman I had married still existed. The woman who once looked at me like I was her whole world. But she was gone. In her place stood a stranger, one who had already moved on before I even knew I had been left behind. Mark stood and stretched like he had just woken from a nap. "I think it's best if you just move on, man. No hard feelings. No hard feelings." Something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, a cold, unfamiliar calm settled over me. I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take anything. The house, the memories, the life I had built, it all felt like a joke now. I stepped outside into the cool night air, my body moving on autopilot. I got into my car and drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a storm of thoughts and emotions too tangled to make sense of. But one thing became clear as the sun started to rise over the horizon. I would not be the man they expected me to be. I would not crumble. I would not drown in self-pity. No, I would rise. I would make them regret ever underestimating me. And it would start with Emily's world. Revenge wasn't just an option. It was the only way forward. Betrayal has a way of reshaping a man. It strips him down, forcing him to see the raw, unfiltered truth about himself and the world around him. For weeks, I carried the weight of Emily and Mark's treachery, letting the bitterness settle into my bones. The old Nathan, the trusting, devoted husband, was dead. In his place stood a man with a singular purpose, to rebuild himself into something stronger, something untouchable. The first step was taking control of my career. I had always been ambitious, but now, ambition became my lifeline. I threw myself into my work, pouring in longer hours, taking on projects no one else dared to touch. I sharpened my skills, expanded my network, and became someone people noticed. But my ultimate goal wasn't just professional success. It was Emily's world. And at the center of it stood one woman, Victoria Sinclair. Victoria was the kind of woman who commanded attention the moment she stepped into a room. Tall, poised, and effortlessly elegant, she had built her company from the ground up, turning it into a corporate empire. She was known for being ruthless in business and entirely detached when it came to personal relationships. Rumor had it she never mixed business with pleasure, and that made her a challenge. And I was never one to back down from a challenge. Emily worked for Victoria as an executive assistant. It wasn't a high-powered position, but it gave her access to power, influence, and wealth. She often bragged about how close she was to her boss, about how Victoria trusted her. It was ironic, really. Emily had walked away from me, thinking she had traded up. She had no idea that she had just handed me the perfect opportunity to take everything she valued. The first time I met Victoria was at a corporate networking event. I had done my research, learning everything I could about her business strategies, her partnerships, even the charities she supported. When I finally approached her, I made sure it wasn't with empty flattery or a desperate attempt to impress. "Victoria Sinclair," I said, extending my hand, my tone smooth but confident. "Nathan Carter, I've been following your work for years. Your ability to restructure failing companies is nothing short of genius." She looked at me with the kind of scrutiny that would make lesser men shift uncomfortably, but I held her gaze. After a moment, she shook my hand, her grip firm. "Flattery won't get you anywhere, Mr. Carter." I smiled. "Good thing I'm not here to flatter, just stating facts." That night, I made sure to leave an impression, not by trying too hard, but by listening, by challenging her on ideas in a way that most men were too intimidated to do. When the event ended, I didn't ask for her number. I didn't push for anything. I let the encounter sit, planting a seed of curiosity. Over the next few weeks, I strategically placed myself in her orbit. I attended meetings where I knew she'd be, asked mutual connections for introductions, and ensured that whenever my name came up, it was attached to something impressive. Slowly but surely, I became impossible to ignore. Then came the opportunity one had been waiting for. One of Victoria's key projects was failing, an acquisition that wasn't delivering the expected returns. I studied every detail, analyzed every mistake, and when the moment was right, I reached out. "I know how to fix this," I told her. Victoria was skeptical. "And why should I trust you with something this important?" "Because I don't need you to trust me," I replied. "Just give me a chance to prove it." She did, and I delivered. Within 3 months, I had turned the project around, cutting losses and generating profits where everyone else had failed. Victoria took notice. She wasn't the type to shower people with praise, but I could see the shift in the way she regarded me. She started inviting me to private meetings, then to high-profile networking events. I became more than just an employee. I became valuable. And when a woman like Victoria values something, She holds on to it. I played my part carefully, never pushing, never making the first move. I let her come to me, and eventually, she did. It started with subtle touches, a hand lingering a little too long on my arm, the way her eyes softened when we talked after hours. One evening, after a particularly long meeting, we found ourselves alone in her office. "You're different, Nathan," she said, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Different is good," I murmured, stepping just a little closer. She didn't pull away. That night marked the beginning of something neither of us admitted out loud at first. Victoria wasn't the kind of woman who wore her heart on her sleeve, and I wasn't the kind of man looking for love. But power? Status? Revenge? Those were things we could build together. It wasn't long before rumors spread. People speculated about our relationship, but Victoria shut them down with her usual icy confidence. Still, behind closed doors, the lines blurred. Dinners turned into late nights. Late nights turned into stolen moments. And soon, Nathan Carter was no longer just an employee. He was the man standing at Victoria Sinclair's side. Then came the proposal. I had been patient, letting things unfold naturally, but I knew exactly when to strike. It was during a business retreat in the French Riviera. We were sitting on the balcony of our private villa, the ocean stretching endlessly before us, when I finally said it. "Marry me." Victoria arched a brow, amused. "That's not exactly a romantic declaration." I smirked. "Romance isn't what we're about." She studied me for a long moment before nodding. "No, it's not. But power? Control? That's something we understand." And just like that, it was done. Nathan Carter had married the most powerful woman in the industry. I was no longer just a man rebuilding his life. I was the man at the top. And the best part? Emily had no idea what was coming. There's a particular satisfaction in watching someone who once looked down on you suddenly be forced to look up. Power, when wielded correctly, is the most exquisite form of revenge. And as I walked into my new office, the one that now bore my name on the door in bold, gleaming letters, I knew that the game had officially changed. My marriage to Victoria had solidified my position in the company, but I hadn't relied on that alone. I had earned my way here. I had made myself indispensable, proving time and time again that I wasn't just a convenient husband to the CEO. I was a force to be reckoned with. Victoria, ever the strategist, recognized my potential and promoted me to an executive role. It wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a statement to everyone in the company. I was here to stay, and my authority was absolute, including over Emily. The day she found out was one of the finest moments of my life. I didn't call for her immediately. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I let the whispers do the work for me. News traveled fast in an office, and Emily, like the rest of them, had to hear it secondhand at first. I imagined the moment the words hit her, the way her breath must have caught in her throat, her fingers curling into fists beneath her desk. By the time she was summoned to my office, she had probably run through every possible scenario in her head, trying to prepare herself. But nothing could have prepared her for what awaited her when she stepped through those doors. She walked in with stiff shoulders, her expression carefully blank. But her eyes betrayed her. There it was. The shock, the fury, the disbelief. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands over the desk as I watched her. "Emily," I said smoothly, as if greeting an old acquaintance rather than a woman who had ripped my heart out and stomped on it. "Good to see you." Her jaw tightened. "Nathan." Her voice was clipped, controlled, but I knew her too well. I could see the storm brewing behind her carefully constructed mask. "That's Mr. Carter to you," I corrected, letting the words sink in. "We wouldn't want to blur the lines of professionalism, would we?" She inhaled sharply through her nose, clearly restraining herself. "What do you want?" I smiled, enjoying the moment far too much. "Oh, nothing in particular. I just wanted to personally introduce myself as your new superior. Since we'll be working together closely, I thought it best to ensure we're on the same page." Her knuckles turned white where she gripped the folder in her hands. "You're my boss now?" I feigned innocence. "Problem with that?" Silence. Of course, there was a problem with that. Just months ago, she had dismissed me like I was nothing. She had walked away, choosing Mark over me, thinking she had upgraded. Now, here I was. Wealthier, more powerful, and standing in a position where she had no choice but to answer to me. And she hated it. "I have work to do," she finally muttered, turning to leave. "Emily." My voice was low, sharp. She stopped in her tracks but didn't turn around. "I expect nothing less than excellence from my team. I trust you won't disappoint me." Her hands curled into fists at her sides, and for a second, I thought she might actually spin around and say something reckless. But she didn't. Instead, she forced out a clipped, "Of course, Mr. Carter," and walked out. I let out a slow exhale, feeling the rush of satisfaction. This was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Emily did everything she could to avoid me, but it was impossible. Our positions meant that she had to report to me directly, and I made sure that every interaction between us reminded her of exactly where we stood. Every staff meeting, every performance review, every email. I maintained professionalism on the surface, but there were subtle jabs in everything I did. "Emily, I'm expecting thorough work. I trust you won't let personal distractions get in the way. Emily, if you need guidance, don't hesitate to ask. I'd hate for you to feel lost again. Emily, I know change is difficult, but adaptability is key in a fast-moving company like this. Do try to keep up." She had no choice but to grit her teeth and bear it. She couldn't lash out, not in an environment like this. She was trapped, forced to endure the slow burn of humiliation, knowing that the man she had thrown away now controlled every aspect of her professional life. And then there was Victoria. If Emily had any delusions about her position in my life, they were shattered every time she saw Victoria drape a hand over my shoulder, every time she overheard our private conversations, every time I arrived in the morning with my wife on my arm. She had given up a man who adored her for a cheap thrill with my so-called best friend. And now, she had to sit back and watch as I lived the life she had once mocked me for wanting. And the jealousy? Oh, it burned in her eyes every single day. Emily wasn't the type to suffer in silence forever. I knew, eventually, she'd break. And she did, just not in the way I expected. One evening, as I was leaving the office late, I found her waiting for me by the elevators. She looked different, exhausted, almost defeated. "Do you enjoy this?" she asked, her voice quiet but strained. I tilted my head. "Enjoy what?" "This. Watching me suffer. Humiliating me." I studied her, considering my response. I could have denied it, played the bigger man, but I wasn't in the mood for games. "Do you regret it?" I asked instead. She flinched, and for a brief moment, I saw something real in her expression, something raw and painful. She swallowed, looking away. "I didn't think." "That's right." I cut in smoothly. "You didn't think. You threw away everything we had for nothing. And now, you have to live with that." She bit her lip, fighting back whatever emotions threatened to spill over. "Was it worth it, Emily?" I pressed. Was he worth it? Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, straightening her posture. "I made a mistake," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly, stepping past her toward the elevator. As the doors slid open, I turned back one last time. "I know," I said, "and the best part? You have to live with that mistake every single day." The doors shut before she could respond, sealing her in the reality she had created for herself. I walked away with a smirk on my lips. Revenge had never tasted so sweet. There's a certain look people get when they realize they've lost everything. A quiet, creeping horror. A slow unraveling of control. I had seen it before. When Emily first discovered I was her boss, when she realized that I had built a life far better than the one she had so carelessly thrown away. But that was nothing compared to what was coming. Emily was many things. Manipulative, selfish, cold, But above all, she was a sore loser. For weeks, I could feel her resentment simmering beneath the surface, the way she stiffened every time I addressed her in meetings, the fake smile she forced when Victoria walked by, the daggers she shot in my direction when she thought I wasn't looking. She was unraveling, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she did something reckless. And she did. When the rumors started swirling, whispers of financial discrepancies, missing funds, I knew exactly where they had come from. Emily had made her move. She thought she was clever. Forged documents. I took the liberty of gathering the necessary documents to prove my concerns. She handed a thick folder to the lead board member, who flipped through it, his expression darkening. The others murmured amongst themselves. Emily turned to me, her lips curling into the smallest smirk. She thought she had one. I smiled back. "Thank you, Emily," I said smoothly. "That was quite the presentation. However, I do have a few questions." She tilted her head, playing innocent. "Of course." I stood, adjusting my suit jacket. "These forged documents." I let the word hang, watching her stiffen. "Where exactly did you get them?" Her fake composure flickered for a split second. "Forged?" she repeated, forcing a laugh. "Nathan, I understand this is upsetting, but the facts speak for themselves." "Indeed they do," I agreed, which is why I took the liberty of reviewing security footage from the finance department over the past few weeks. Her breath hitched. I caught it, the tiny movement, the way her fingers twitched slightly at her sides. I turned to the board and gestured toward the projector screen. "Allow me to share something very interesting." The lights dimmed. The footage played. There she was, in perfect clarity. Emily sneaking into restricted areas after hours, slipping documents into her bag, typing on a computer that wasn't hers. The timestamps, the dates, the undeniable proof of her deception. Silence fell over the room. Victoria was the first to speak. "Emily," she said, her voice eerily calm. "What the hell is this?" Emily shot up from her chair. This is fake," she blurted out. "He's setting me up." I raised an eyebrow. "The way you set me up?" Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. But no one was on her side. She knew it. And then, the final blow. "Mr. Carter," one of the board members said, turning to me, "I assume you've already contacted legal?" I nodded. "Yes. Authorities should be arriving any moment now." Right on cue, security entered the room, two uniformed officers stepping forward. Emily's face drained of color. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "You can't prove anything." I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough so only she could hear. "I don't have to prove anything, Emily. You did that all by yourself." She lunged for me, but the officers caught her arms, restraining her. "You're going to regret this," she spat. "I'll ruin you." I leaned in slightly, my expression unreadable. "You already tried," I murmured. "And look where it got you." She screamed as they dragged her away, her voice echoing down the hallway until it faded into nothing. I turned back to the board, adjusting my cufflinks. "Well," I said lightly, "that was an eventful meeting. Shall we move on to more important matters?" The tension broke, murmurs rippling across the room. Victoria shook her head with an exasperated sigh before giving me a look that was half amused, half impressed. And just like that, Emily was gone. Her trial didn't take long. With the overwhelming evidence against her, the verdict was swift: fraud, falsifying company documents, attempted financial sabotage. 3 years in prison. It wasn't enough to erase what she had done to me, but it was enough to make sure she could never do it to anyone else. Mark didn't even bother showing up for her sentencing. The man she had destroyed our marriage for had abandoned her the moment things got difficult. Poetic justice. The news spread quickly. Employees whispered about it in the hallways. Reporters tried to dig for more. But at the end of the day, it all boiled down to one simple truth. Emily had tried to bury me. Instead, she had buried herself. They say time heals all wounds, but I've never believed that. Time doesn't erase pain. It just dulls it, reshapes it, turns it into something you learn to live with. But what time does do, without fail, is reveal the truth. And the truth was, Emily had lost everything. With Emily locked away, life moved forward. My marriage to Victoria became stronger with each passing year. Unlike my first marriage, this one was built on mutual respect, trust, and a shared ambition that pushed us both to new heights. Victoria and I weren't just partners in marriage. We were partners in power. Under our leadership, the company expanded, dominating industries we once only dreamed of entering. My name became one people feared and admired. I was no longer the man left behind, the fool betrayed by his wife and best friend. I was Nathan Carter, the man who took control of his fate and reshaped it into something greater. Meanwhile, Emily faded from memory. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers of her, stories from the prison system, updates from people who still kept tabs on the scandal. She wasn't handling it well. The once proud, cunning woman who had manipulated and schemed her way through life had been broken by the very game she played. She wasn't a queen anymore. She was an inmate. And while I thrived, she suffered. 3 years later, Emily walked out of prison a ghost of the woman she once was. She had no home, no money, no career. Mark had vanished from her life the moment she was arrested. The people she once considered friends had turned their backs. She had nothing. I wasn't there to see her first steps back into the world, but I imagined it often. How did it feel to return to the same streets, the same city, knowing that nothing belonged to her anymore? That everything she had once held so tightly had slipped through her fingers? I didn't care enough to seek her out, but eventually, she sought me. It happened on a Wednesday. I was leaving the office late, stepping out into the crisp night air, when I heard her voice. Nathan. It had been years since I'd heard her say my name, but I recognized it instantly. There was no venom this time, no arrogance, just exhaustion. I turned, and there she was. Emily. Her once polished appearance was gone. Her hair, always so perfectly styled, was now dull and lifeless. Her designer clothes had been replaced by something plain, cheap, something that screamed struggle. The confidence in her posture had vanished, replaced by a hesitancy that almost made her look small. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she swallowed hard, glancing away before forcing herself to meet my gaze. Can we talk? I should have walked away. I should have laughed, maybe thrown a cutting remark about how the mighty had fallen. But something in me, whether it was curiosity, satisfaction, or the final remnants of the past, made me nod. We sat at a small cafe nearby, one I used to take her to when we were married. Back then, she had always ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, barely tasting it as she scrolled through her phone or talked about her latest luxury purchase. Tonight, she ordered nothing. She sat across from me, hands curled around her sleeves, as if she could make herself disappear. Then she spoke. I lost everything, Nathan, she whispered. I know I deserved it. I know I hurt you, and I have no right to ask for anything. But, she exhaled shakily, I just need you to know I'm sorry. I watched her carefully, searching for a trick, a hidden motive, but there was none. For the first time in her life, Emily had nothing to offer, nothing to manipulate. She was just lost. I let the silence stretch between us before finally leaning back in my chair. You're right, I said. You did deserve it. She flinched. I don't say that to be cruel, I continued. I say it because it's the truth. You made your choices, and you paid the price. And now, you want, what? Forgiveness? She hesitated before nodding. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of everything settle. The years of betrayal, the pain, the revenge. And then, I gave her the only answer I could. I don't care what you feel, Emily. Her lips parted slightly, her breath hitching. You made your bed, I said, standing. And now, you get to lie in it. I dropped a few bills on the table, enough for her to eat, if she chose to, then turned and walked away. This time, I was the one leaving her behind. And I didn't look back. The past has a strange way of haunting us. Some people run from it, others try to fix it. But me? I buried mine a long time ago. Or at least, I thought I did. Until Emily walked into my office. She looked even worse than the last time I'd seen her. Her once vibrant face was tired, her eyes shadowed with regret. But the words never came. Because deep down, she knew. This was a door that would never reopen. I stood, buttoning my suit jacket, signaling that the conversation was over. She looked at me one last time, searching for something. Remorse, warmth, forgiveness. She found none. Without another word, Emily turned and walked away. I didn't watch her go. I simply sat back down, picked up my pen, and returned to my work. She was my past, and I had no intention of letting her be a part of my future. I had one, and she would never forget the price of betrayal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales of love, betrayal, and revenge. What would you have done in Nathan's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you hooked till the very last word. See you soon.